Good afternoon, guys. Now, I've got discussion C for you. It's a narrative I made. Okay, title: The therapist who says we're overusing therapy. Okay, here we go with today's discussion. So please enjoy. On Tuesday morning, the waiting room fills before I've even hung my coat. A young man in a fleece jacket scrolls through his phone, jaw tight. A mother with a diaper bag sits stiffly as if bracing for impact. A college student stares at the carpet, earbuds in, mouthing lyrics. They are all here for therapy. They are here because somewhere along the way, therapy became the place you go when life feels on or even slightly off kilter. I watch them through the half open door and think, not unkindly, most of you don't need to be here. I don't mean that dismissively. I believe in therapy with the kind of conviction that comes from watching it save people. I've seen therapy pull someone back from the edge of suicide. I've helped veterans sleep through the night for the first time in years and grieving guide a grieving parent through the most powerful tools humans have invented for healing. But lately I've begun to feel like a carpenter watching people use a hammer to butter their toast. The first session, a few months ago, a woman named Claire came to see me. She was in her early 30s with a neat bun and a tote bag full of color-coded planners that she sat down, exhaled sharply, and said, I think I need therapy because I'm overwhelmed. I asked her what overwhelmed meant. She told me she had a demanding job, 2 young kids, aging parents, and a partner who traveled for work. She told me she felt tired, irritable, stretched thin, she told me she cried in the car sometimes. As she spoke, I felt a familiar ache, the ache of recognizing that what she was describing wasn't pathology, it was adulthood. I wanted to tell her, you don't need therapy, you need sleep, you need help, you need a community that doesn't expect you to carry everything alone. But she had already absorbed the cultural message that any discomfort, any strain, any movement of emotional turbulence is a sign that something is clinically wrong. Therapy had become her first stop, not her resort, her last resort. The cultural the cultural drift. When I started practicing, therapy was something people sought when they were in real distress, when life had become unmanageable, when trauma had reshaped their days, when depression had hollowed out their capacity to function. Now, therapy is a lifestyle, a weekly ritual, a subscription service for the soul. People talk about the therapist the way they talk about their favorite baristas. My therapist says has become a kind of social currency, a way of signaling emotional fluency. Therapy is no longer a place for healing, it's a place for processing the ordinary function of being alive. I see it in the sessions that fill my calendar. A teenager who feels lonely because high school is lonely. A couple who argues about chores because chores are annoying. A worker who feels bored because their job is boring. A parent who feels overwhelmed because parenting is overwhelming. These are not clinical problems. These are human ones. The therapist is the therapist's quiet conflict. There is a moment in almost every session where I feel the tension between what the person expects and what I know they expect: a diagnosis, a treatment, a plan, a therapeutic arc. They expect me to help them work through something that may not need working through so much as living through. And I face a quiet conflict. Do I treat what is not clinical? Do I reinforce the belief that every discomfort requires professional intervention? Do I become a stand in for the community, the family, the friendships and that have eroded. Sometimes I feel like a substitute teacher for the emotional skills people were never taught. The cost of overusing therapy. The cost of this cultural drift is subtle but profound. We lose the ability to tolerate discomfort. We lose the ability, we lose the patience of, of repairing relationships without a mediator. We lose the muscle, the memory of resilience. We lose the communal webs that once held us. And perhaps the most painfully, we crowd out the we crowd out those who truly need care. My colleagues who treat severe mental illness are drowning. Their waiting lists stretch for months. Their patients cycle through crisis, while others attend weekly sessions to talk about workplace boredom. Therapy as a scalpel. We are using it like a butter knife. What therapy is actually for? Therapy for trauma that has rewired the nervous system. It is for depression that steals appetite and hope. It is for anxiety that hacks the body. It is for grief that has calcified into paralysis. It is for addiction and pulsations and patterns that cannot be interrupted alone. Therapy is not meant to be the primary container for ordinary human development. The harder work outside the office. When I imagine healthier culture, I imagine Claire sitting at her kitchen table with a friend who says, "You're carrying too much. Let me help." I imagine the teenager finding a mentor. I imagine couple learning the couple learning to argue without assuming something is broken. I imagine workplaces that treat exhaustion as a signal, not a weakness. We need friendships deep enough to hold sorrow. Families that know how to repair after conflict. Communities that communities rather communities that gather and listen. Schools that teach emotional literacy. Workplaces that honor human limits. Those are not replacements for therapy. They are the scaffolding that makes therapy rare and powerful rather than routine and dull. A therapist's a therapist plea. I want therapy to remain uh, sacred. I want it to be the place people go when they truly need help, not the place they go because they've forgotten how to live with the ordinary turbulence of being human. I want us to trust ourselves again. I want us to trust each other again. I want therapy to be what it was meant to be, a room for healing, not a room for living. The therapist who says Pennsylvania is overusing therapy. On Tuesday mornings in my Northwest Pennsylvania clinic, the waiting room it fills before I've even logged into the EHR. A young man in a fleece jacket scrolls through his phone, jaw tight. A mother with a diaper bag sits stiffly, bracing for impact. A college student stares at the carpet, earbuds in, mouthing lyrics. They are here for therapy. They are here because somewhere along the way, therapy became the place you go when life feels even slightly off kilter. I watch them through the half open door and think, not unkindly, most of you don't need to be here. I don't mean that dismissively. I believe in therapy with the kind of conviction that comes from watching it save people, but also believe something that makes Pennsylvania legislators shift in their seats when I say it out loud. Our Commonwealth is quietly overusing therapy, and our policies are encouraging it. A few months ago, a woman named Claire came to see me, early 30s, neat bun, tote bag full of color coded planners. She sat down, exhaled sharply, and said, I think I need therapy because I'm overwhelmed. Her story was familiar: demanding job, two young kids, aging parents, a partner who travels. She felt tired, irritable, stretched thin. She cried in the car sometimes. What she described wasn't pathology, it was adulthood under strain, made heavier by Pennsylvania's fragmented child care system. stagnant wages, and the absence of paid family leave. But our system doesn't have a place for adulthood under strain. It has therapy, it has billing codes, it has reimbursement structure that funnels ordinary human struggle into clinical care because that's the only funded option. Claire didn't need therapy. She needed time, childcare, workplace flexibility, and community that didn't expect her to carry everything alone. But none of those are covered benefits in Pennsylvania. Therapy is how Pennsylvania policy turned therapy into a catch-all. Over the past decade, Pennsylvania has expanded access to mental health services through party reinforcement, telehealth reimbursement, and county level behavioral health initiatives. Those these efforts were necessary, but accessibility without discernment creates a new problem. Therapy becomes the default intervention for every form of distress. Three Pennsylvania specific dynamics drive this. County MHID funding has been flat for over a decade. Community supports have weathered, leaving therapy as the only remaining option. Medicaid reimbursement incentives, clinical labeling, ordinary stress becomes adjustment disorder because that's how providers keep the lights on. Schools rely on therapy because Pennsylvania underfunds counselors, social workers, and restorative practices. When a student struggles, the only funded pathway is a referral. We didn't intend to medicalize everyday life, but our policies nudged us there. The hidden cost, a system that fails those who need it most. The consequences are not abstract, they show up in my clinic every day. People with severe depression wait months for care because schedules are full of people processing workplace boredom. People with trauma cycle through crisis because clinicians are stretched thin by non-clinical caseloads. People with psychosis lose stability because therapy slots are consumed by the worried well. Pennsylvania's behavioral health workforce shortages, especially in rural counties, magnifies the problem. When therapy becomes the catch-all, those who truly need care are pushed to the margins. This is not a failure of individuals. It is a failure of policy design. What therapy is actually for? Therapy is for trauma that has rewired the nervous system. It is for depression that steals appetites and hope. It is for anxiety that steals, that hacks the body. It is for grief that calcified into paralysis. It is for addiction, compulsions, and patterns that cannot be interpreted alone. Therapy is not meant to be the primary container for ordinary human development, but Pennsylvania's policies have made it exactly that. Policy reforms in Pennsylvania needs now. If we want therapy to be used appropriately, we must redesign the Commonwealth's behavioral health system around the full spectrum of human need, not just the clinical slice. Restore and expand county MHID funding. Pennsylvania counties have been operating with flat allocations since 2012. This has served community-based supports, peer networks, drop-in centers, crisis stabilization, youth mentorship. Restoring and expanding funding would rebuild the non-clinical scaffolding that prevents over-reliance on therapy. Restore MHID funding. Reform Medicaid reimbursement. Create reimbursement pathways for non-clinical supports. Parenting groups, stress management classes, conflict resolution training, so providers aren't forced to pathologize normal stress to get paid. Reform Medicaid reimbursement. Strengthen school-based supports. Increased funding for school counselors, social workers, and restorative practices. Therapy should not be the only funded option when a student struggles. Expand school supports. Invest in rural behavioral health infrastructure. Northwest and central Pennsylvania face severe workforce shortages. Fund loan repayment programs, role training pipelines, and integrated community hubs that reduce inappropriate referrals to therapy. Invest rural infrastructure Launch a statewide emotional literacy campaign. Teach Pennsylvanians the difference between discomfort and disorder. Normalize community-based coping. Reduce unnecessary clinical utilization. Launch emotional literacy campaign. These reforms don't diminish therapy, they protect it. A therapist plead for Harrisburg. I want therapy to remain sacred. I want it to be the place people go when they truly need help, not the place they go because Pennsylvania's policies have left them nowhere else to turn. We need to rebuild the structures that once held us, families that repair, communities that gather, workplaces that honor limits, schools that teach emotional competence. And we need policies that fund those structures with the same seriousness we fund clinical care. Therapy should be a scalpel, not a Swiss Army knife. A place for healing, not a place for living. Okay, guys, those are your shows for now. I might jump back on later tonight. For now, Gator Wellness, take care, folks.